Kuna video ambayo imekuwa ikisambaa sana mtandaoni na imezua maswala mengi miongoni mwa Wakenya kuhusu afya ya Rais wa Kenya William Ruto. Watu wengi wanajiuliza ikiwa yuko katika hali nzuri kiafya au la. Video hiyo imesambazwa na watumiaji wengi sana mtandao ya kijamii, hasa kwenye X, ambapo mjadala mkubwa sana umeibuka kuhusu ziara ya Rais Ruto nchini Afrika Kusini. Katika video hiyo, Rais anaonekana akitembea kwa namna ambayo baadhi ya watu wameitafsiri kuwa na kuchechemea. Baadhi ya watu wamekuwa wakidai kuwa video hiyo imetengenezwa kwa kutumia teknolojia AI, huku wengine wakisema kwa picha hizo ni halisi kutokana na video zilizochapishwa na vyanzo rasmi vya Afrika Kusini. Hata hivyo, hadi sasa hakuna taarifa rasmi iliyothibitishwa kuwa rais ana tatizo lolote la kiafya. Wakenya wengi wanaendelea kutoa maoni yao mtandaoni. Wapo wanaosema kwamba rais anaonekana kupungua uzito kulinganisha na miaka iliyopita, jambo ambalo limeongeza maswala kuhusu hali yake ya afya. Sasa ningependa kusikiza maoni yako. Je, baada ya kuangalia video hiyo una maoni gani? Je, unadhani kuna sababu ya wananchi kuwa na wasiwasi au ni mjadala wa kawaida tu wa mitandaoni? Andika maoni yako kwenye sehemu ya maoni hapo chini. Nitayasoma yote na tutayajadili katika video inayofuata.
President Ruto here.
Excellencies, we will now see the national anthems for both the countries.
Thank you very much. Please, let's take our seats. Your Excellency, my brother President Cyril Ramaphosa, he just explained to me that the correct pronunciation is not what everybody else has been saying. It is Ramaphosa. And I hope members of my delegation have picked it up. Listening to the good people that spoke here, especially those from the private sector, I was finding it difficult whether they were making requests or giving us instructions. Your Excellency, Mr. President, distinguished government officials, esteemed business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege for me to join you in this joint business forum between Kenya and South Africa, a gathering that reflects both the deepening bond between our two nations and our shared resolve to shape Africa's economic future through partnership, enterprise, and integration. I'm informed that today's engagement have been candid, rich, and forward-looking. My hope is that we leave here with concrete opportunities. We've had good intentions, but we must consolidate them into deals. From where I sit, I see two complementary economies with combined power to drive Africa's transformation. Kenya and South Africa stand among our continent's foremost economic anchors. South Africa is one of Africa's premier industrial and financial powerhouses, while Kenya is the gateway to East and Central Africa that is propelled by a dynamic private sector, a thriving digital innovation ecosystem, and strategic infrastructure. Our partnership advances steadily across trade, investment, tourism, aviation, and most importantly, manufacturing, financial services, ICT, and logistics. Today, more than 60 South African companies operate in Kenya, in the banking sector, in insurance, retail, manufacturing, telecommunication, infrastructure, and some of them in real estate. South Africa remains among the leading sources of foreign direct investment in Kenya, even as Kenyan enterprises increasingly venture south in search of new markets and partnerships. In 2025, bilateral trade between our two countries reached approximately $680 million. This is meaningful progress, but it is also a measure of how much potential remains untapped. Kenya supplies tea, coffee, horticulture, cut flowers, and some manufactured goods, while South Africa supplies machinery, vehicles, pharmaceuticals, steel, and industrial inputs. Such complementarity is the very foundation for a deeper industrial cooperation and shared value chains. Ladies and gentlemen, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is among the greatest economic opportunities of our generation. The platform that will turn fragmented markets into a single, competitive bloc capable of industrializing our economies, attracting investment, and creating jobs. Listening to the private sector actors break down what is going on at the East African community, what is going on at SADC, what is going on in COMESA, and the coming together of the three blocs through the tripartite agreement, which came into force. But now we need greater implementation, acceleration actually of implementation. We have offered to host the headquarters in Kenya of the TFTA so that we can provide momentum and provide the ecosystem for the integration of our markets so that we can unlock this huge potential of 800 million people market. And we build, of course, into the bigger market of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Yet, intra-Africa trade remains far below global average. We've been given numbers here. Intra-Asian trade is at close to 60. Intra-European trade is close to 70. Intra-African trade is at 17. The region that has progressed the most in intra-regional trade is the East African community. But we're still way below where we should be. In other words, what the numbers tell us is we are struggling looking for markets very far from our continent, when actually the market in our continent is virgin. But the intra-Africa trade deficit remains far below the global average, as I have said, and that is precisely why partnerships such as ours between Kenya and South Africa matters. Transformation begins right there. Together, our two nations command the financial strength, industrial capacity, entrepreneurial talent, and innovation ecosystem to power not just intra-Africa trade, but the transformation of our continent. We must move beyond conventional trade and deliberately build integrated regional value chains in manufacturing, agriculture, mining, logistics, pharmaceuticals, energy, digital services, and green industrialization. Listening to the actors here earlier, we seem to be speaking in compartments. We must make what happens in South Africa stimulate what happens in Kenya, and vice versa. And policymakers, President Ramaphosa and myself, can do so much. But where the rubber meets the road is at the business level. You are the people who can move numbers. You are the people who can move figures. Changing these figures requires the private sector. And that is why on a state visit like this, it doesn't end with government. We have made it deliberate and intentional that after we have signed all the MOUs, we have agreed on all the policy frameworks, the private sector must be the engine that brings the MOUs, the policies into reality. And I want to say I commend the steady cooperation under our Joint Commission for Cooperation and Joint Trade Committee, which remain vital platforms for resolving trade matters and advancing our shared agenda. We must now ensure full implementation of their outcome so that businesses and investors feel tangible benefits. Today's discussions reveal opportunity across every strategic sector. In manufacturing, Kenya's industrial parks, special economic zones, and export processing zones offer ready platforms for regional partnerships, serving African markets under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. South Africa's strength in automotive production, pharmaceuticals, mining, chemicals, and steel complement Kenya's rise as a regional production and logistics hub. Let us collaborate boldly